The high desert doesn't just kill you with heat, it kills you with silence. It stretches you thin, bakes the hope from your bones, until you're just a shadow waiting for the buzzards. For Magdalena Thorne, stranded at the scorched earth outpost of Calera station, that silence was about to break. She wasn't waiting for the stagecoach. She was waiting for a man. But the man who came wasn't the one she expected. He was a giant, carved from the red rock itself, a phantom of the Chiricahua. And when his shadow fell across her, he spoke 4 words that would end her life and begin it all at once. "You're coming with me." The heat was a physical weight. It pressed down on the tin roof of Calera station, making the air inside vibrate like a struck guitar string. Magdalena Thorne brushed a damp strand of blonde hair from her forehead, her gaze fixed on the shimmering horizon. Nothing. Just the endless, aching flat line of the Arizona Territory. "He ain't coming today, ma'am," a voice rasped. Magdalena turned. Jeremiah Stubbs, the station master, leaned in the doorway. He was a man made of jerky and tobacco stain, his face a road map of bad decisions and worse weather. "The stage is late, Mr. Stubbs. Not," she corrected herself, "cancelled." Stubbs spat a brown stream into the dust. "Ain't talking about the stage, I'm talking about him, Mr. Elias Thorne, big-time surveyor for the railroad." He said the title like a curse. "Heard the Chiricahua cut the wire up by Benson's Pass. No messages getting through, and no sensible man is riding solo through the Sulphur Springs Valley, not unless he's got a death wish." Magdalena's jaw tightened. "My husband is a meticulous man, Mr. Stubbs. He will be here." Stubbs just grunted and looked back out at the vast, sun-bleached emptiness. "Meticulous? Right." He squinted. "That's the trouble out here, Mom. The land ain't meticulous. It's angry. And the Apache, they're its shadow." He'd been muttering about the Apache all morning. Geronimo's name was a whisper, but the real fear, the immediate fear, was of a local war leader, a man they said was unnaturally tall, a ghost who moved between worlds. Stubbs called him Taza. Magdalena fanned herself with a copy of Harper's Weekly, the paper limp in her damp hands. She hated this place. She hated the grit that found its way into her teeth, the smell of alkali and despair. She had come from Boston, a world of libraries and gas lamps, following a husband who promised her a grand adventure. But Elias had changed. The desert had burned away his charm, leaving only a cold, obsessive ambition. He was always gone, charting his lines, mapping his futures. Futures that she was beginning to fear no longer included her. That was why she was here, not just to meet him, but to deliver an ultimatum. The small leather satchel by her feet contained more than just a change of clothes. It held her ticket back east. The silence of the afternoon was suddenly, profoundly broken. It wasn't a gunshot, it wasn't a yell, it was the soft thud of a horse's hoof on the hardpan right outside the door. One horse. Stubbs froze. He reached slowly for the greener shotgun propped against the telegraph desk. "Mr. Stubbs?" Magdalena whispered, her heart seizing. The shadow that fell across the doorway wasn't Stubbs. It was immense. He didn't duck. He seemed to fill the entire frame, a man who had to be 6.5 feet tall, built not of flesh, but of corded muscle and sun-scorched leather. He wore a simple breechclout and knee-high moccasins. A single eagle feather was tied in his long black hair. His face was a mask of grief and fury, scarred by war and weather. But it was his eyes that stopped Magdalena's breath. They were black, intelligent, and utterly devoid of mercy. He was, without a doubt, the man they called Taza. Stubbs, to his credit, found his nerve. He swung the shotgun up. "That's far enough, Patch. This here's a federal station. You turn that pony round and—" The Apache moved. It wasn't a blur, not a flash. It was a simple, impossible act of speed. He crossed the 10 feet of the station in a single, fluid motion. He didn't grab the shotgun. He grabbed Stubbs's wrist. The sound of bone snapping was sharp and dry, like a breaking stick. Stubbs howled and collapsed, clutching his arm. The shotgun clattered to the floor. Taza never even looked at him. His black eyes were locked on Magdalena. He scanned her from head to foot, not with lust, but with a terrifying, unreadable intent. He was searching for something. Magdalena found herself pressed back against the wall, her hand over her mouth, her mind screaming. This was it. This was the horror story the papers back east whispered about. Taza took a step closer. The smell of pine smoke, sweat, and the mountains clung to him. He raised a hand and she flinched, expecting a blow. He pointed, not at her, but at the small leather satchel by her feet. Her escape. Then he looked directly into her eyes. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. His English was broken, but his meaning was perfectly clear. "You're coming with me." Terror is a paralyzing thing. It roots the feet and silences the tongue. Magdalena felt it, cold and sharp, as Taza's large hand closed around her upper arm. It wasn't a cruel grip, not a pinch, but it was absolute. It was the grip of a man used to handling uncooperative livestock. "No!" she screamed, finding her voice. "No, Mr. Stubbs! Help me!" Stubbs was groaning on the floor, cradling his broken wrist, his face pale with shock. "Can't, Mum, God help you." Taza ignored her plea. With a single, effortless pull, he hauled her from the station, out into the blinding 500-degree eye of the sun. Her satchel was left behind. Her ticket east, or her ultimatum, lay forgotten in the dust. A lean, muscular Appaloosa stood waiting, its reins loose. Taza didn't bother with formalities. He grabbed Magdalena by the waist and threw her sideways onto the horse's back as if she were a sack of flour. Before she could even gasp, he had mounted behind her, his arms caging her in, one hand gripping the reins, the other resting lightly on her hip. She was trapped, the heat of his body pressed against her back, a terrifying human furnace. "My husband!" she cried, a desperate, foolish plea. "He's coming! Elias Thorne! He'll have you all hanged!" Taza's only response was a sharp kick to the horse's flanks. The station, Stubbs, her old life, it all vanished in a cloud of alkali dust. The journey was a blur of escalating misery. He didn't ride fast, not at first. He pushed the horse at a steady, ground-eating trot, moving east, away from the established trails, away from the railroad, and into the Dragoon Mountains. The terrain, flat and manageable at first, quickly turned hostile. They moved through narrow canyons, the rock walls painted with mineral stripes of ochre and viridian. They climbed switchbacks so steep, Magdalena had to cling to the horse's mane to keep from sliding off. Her terror began to curdle into a strange, numbed exhaustion. This was not a random raid. This was a targeted, professional abduction. He had come for her. But why? The questions hammered at her mind. Ransom? There was no time to send a note. Lust? He had not touched her improperly, his hand on her hip a point of balance, not possession. He treated her with a terrifying, cold indifference. By the second hour, the Bostonian lady was gone. The heat, the motion, the sheer, unrelenting physicality of the ride had stripped her bare. Her fine clothes were torn, her hair a tangled mat of sweat and dust. She tried to fight once. As they navigated a shallow, dry riverbed, she saw a chance. He was focused on the horse's footing. With a sudden burst of strength, she twisted, digging her nails into his forearm and throwing her weight to the side, hoping to topple them both. He didn't even flinch. His arm, the one she'd raked, was like ironwood. He simply rebalanced, and his grip on her waist tightened, lifting her an inch off the horse's back, squeezing the air from her lungs. "Be still," he commanded. The word was a low growl, a promise of consequences. She slumped, defeated. The fight was gone, replaced by a thirsty, aching despair. As dusk began to purple the canyons, Tarza finally slowed. He hadn't spoken another word for 6 hours. They were deep in a box canyon. He dismounted, pulling her down with him. Her legs, unused to the saddle, buckled. She fell to her knees. He ignored her, walking to the rock face, where he knelt and pushed aside a curtain of brush. A small spring, no bigger than a dinner plate, seeped clear water into a stone basin. He filled a canteen made from a gourd, walked back, and held it out to her. She stared at it, her throat burning. This was her captor, a savage, a murderer, and he was offering her water. "Drink," he said. She snatched it from him, her hands shaking, and drank. The water was cold, metallic, and the most wonderful thing she had ever tasted. She drank until she coughed, water spilling down the front of her ruined dress. He watched her, his face impassive in the gathering gloom. Then he took the canteen, drank himself, and pulled a piece of dried jerky from a pouch. He tore it in two and offered her half. She recoiled. "I will not." He shrugged and ate his piece, then put the other half back. He tied the horse to a gnarled mesquite, and then, to her horror, sat down. He leaned his back against a boulder, his knees drawn up, not 10 feet from her. What are you doing?" she whispered. "We wait," he said. "Wait for what? The dark?" "No, we wait for the patrol." Magdalena's heart leapt. "A patrol? Cavalry? You're letting them find us? You're surrendering?" A sound rumbled in Tarza's chest. It was a dry, mirthless laugh. "The bluecoats, they ride for your husband, for the maps." "Maps? What are you talking about?" He looked up, and for the first time, his eyes seemed to focus on her, see her, not as an object, but as a person. "Your husband, Elias Thorne, he is a very meticulous man." He had used her own word. The chill that ran down her spine had nothing to do with the night air. Suddenly she heard it, the jingle of harness, the muffled sound of hooves on sand. It was distant, but coming closer. "They're coming," she hissed, a wild hope surging. "You're finished." She scrambled to her feet, opened her mouth to scream, to shout, to bring the U.S. cavalry crashing down on this monster. Tarza's hand shot out and clamped over her mouth. He didn't pull her down. He just held her there. His grip was firm, suffocating. She smelled the dust on his skin. "They look for me," he whispered, his voice directly in her ear, a hot, urgent breath. "They find me. They shoot. They find you. They shoot me. Then they ask questions. Maybe." His eyes bored into hers. "You scream, we both die. Here, now. Shiki, my friend." She stared at him, wide-eyed over his hand. The sounds were closer now. A voice. American. "Over here, Sergeant. Tracks look fresh." Her mind raced. He was right. A firefight. In the dark. In a narrow canyon. She would be caught in the middle. She was a liability to them. A witness. The patrol was just at the mouth of the canyon. She could feel the vibration of their horses. Tarza's hand was a vice. She had a choice. Scream and die with her captor, or be still and live another minute as his prisoner. Slowly, deliberately, she stopped struggling. She locked her eyes on his and gave a single, sharp nod. Tarza held her gaze for a long second, judging. Then, slowly, he released his hand. She didn't scream. She stood beside him, a prisoner by choice, and listened as the patrol rode past the mouth of the canyon, their voices fading into the night, abandoning her to a fate she suddenly, terrifyingly, realized she had just chosen. The remainder of the night journey was a descent into a living nightmare. Taza pushed on, now in the dark, with an instinct she couldn't comprehend. He moved through the blackness as if it were daylight, the horse's hooves finding purchase on trails that weren't there. Magdalena was no longer just a prisoner. She was a ghost being led into the underworld. When the sun finally rose, it revealed they were no longer in the canyons. They were high, impossibly high, in a fortress of stone. The Dragoon Mountains. Taza guided the horse through a final narrow pass, a needle's eye, barely wide enough for one rider. As they emerged, Magdalena gasped. It wasn't a camp, it was a rancheria. Hidden in a high-altitude basin, sheltered by towering pinnacles of granite, was a village. Dozens of wickiups, domed brush-covered huts, were scattered beneath the pines. The air was cooler here, and the smell of wood smoke and cooking food hung in the air. But something was wrong. There were no warriors greeting their returning leader. Only a few figures, women, old men, and children, who moved with a leaden, listless energy. They were thin. Their ribs showed. Their eyes were hollow. This wasn't a stronghold. It was a hospital. It was a refugee camp. An old woman, her face a web of wrinkles, her hair white, stepped forward as Taza dismounted. She looked at Taza, then at Magdalena, her black eyes filled with a venomous hatred. She spat a stream of Apache words at Taza, pointing at Magdalena. Taza replied in a low, sharp tone. He dismounted and pulled Magdalena down, his hand still on her arm. He marched her toward the center of the camp. The villagers stared. They didn't threaten her. They just watched, their faces grim. She was a curiosity, a white woman, a symbol of their misery. Taza stopped in front of the largest wickiup and shoved her inside. It was dark, smoky. An old woman, Narlin, the one who had spat at her, was already there, stirring a pot over a low fire. She scowled at Magdalena. Taza spoke to Narlin in their tongue, his voice a command. Narlin's eyes flashed, but she nodded. Taza turned to Magdalena. "You stay." He started to leave. "Wait!" Magdalena's voice was raw. "Why? Why me? What do you want? If it's ransom, my husband—" Taza spun around, his face a sudden thunder cloud. "Your husband!" he spat. He walked back to her, looming over her. "You are his Adagash, his wife?" "Yes." He reached into a leather pouch at his side and pulled out a roll of papers. He threw them at her feet. Magdalena unrolled them. Her blood ran cold. They were maps, survey maps, and they were in her husband's unmistakable precise hand, but they weren't for the railroad. She saw the lines, the meticulous notes. Agua Fria, Ojo Caliente, Hidden Spring. He had charted every water source in the valley, and in the margins, in his same neat script, were other notes. High mineral content. Sulfur trace. Arsenic? I don't understand, she whispered, but she did. He finds our water, Taza said, his voice deadly. He finds our sacred places. Then he poisons them. "No!" Magdalena cried, scrambling to her feet. "Elias wouldn't. He's a surveyor. He's working for the government." "He works for the Chug. Money!" Taza roared, silencing her. "He finds the springs. Then he brings his other men, the miners. They dig. They use the poison." He stabbed a finger at the map. "This one. Agua Fria. My people drink. My son drank." The word hung in the air. Son. "He got sick," Taza continued, his voice dropping, the rage replaced by a chasm of grief. "The water sickness, it burned him from the inside. My wife, his mother, she held him. She watched him die. For 3 days. Magdalena's hands flew to her mouth. Oh God, your God, Taza said, his face inches from hers. He is not here. My wife. She died 2 moons later. She would not eat. She would not live. Your husband, Elias Thorne. He killed them. Now he kills my people. Slowly. He maps the water so the soldiers can find us. He poisons the water so we die if they do not. Magdalena was reeling, the smoke-filled hut spinning. But me? Why take me? Taza stared at her, and the look in his eyes changed. The rage was gone, replaced by that same, unreadable intensity from the station. Your husband, Taza said, is meeting with the soldier chief, Major Croft, at Fort Grant, tomorrow. He gives them these. He pointed to the maps. He will tell them the Apache have taken his wife. He will ask the soldiers to ride. He will use your name to make them kill us all. It was a cold, brutal, and brilliant plan. Elias would be the grieving husband, forced into action. He would get his land, get the minerals, and be hailed as a hero. He thinks, I am your shield, Taza said, that I will trade you for my people's lives. And will you? Magdalena asked, her voice trembling. Taza stepped back. His massive frame seemed to shrink, weighed down by a burden she couldn't imagine. No, he said, so quietly she almost missed it. I did not take you for a shield. I did not take you for ransom. He turned and pointed to the old woman, Narlin, who was watching them with hawk-like eyes. I took you, because my people are sick. The child of my sister. She has the same sickness. The one that killed my son. He looked at Magdalena, and his gaze pierced her. You are a white woman. You are his woman. You will know his poisons. You will make her well. The twist was so sharp, so unexpected, it knocked the wind from her. He hadn't stolen a hostage. He had captured a doctor. I'm not a doctor, she stammered. I know nothing. You are NDA. White, Taza said, as if it were the same thing. You know their magic. Their poison. You will fix what your husband has broken, or you will die here. With us. He turned and was gone, leaving Magdalena alone in the smoky hut with the grieving, hateful stare of Narlin, and the undeniable proof of her husband's monstrousness lying in the dust at her feet. For 2 days, Magdalena was a prisoner of the Wickiup. Narlin, the old woman, was her guard, her jailer, and her tormentor. The woman clearly loathed her, seeing her as the embodiment of the sickness that was destroying her people. Narlin offered her food, a thin, bitter stew, but watched her with a hawk's vigilance. But Magdalena's terror was slowly being replaced by a sickening, cold clarity. She reread Elias's maps 12 times. The notes. Arsenic, high mercury. He wasn't just observing, he was testing. This wasn't an accident of mining, it was a deliberate, calculated extermination. On the 3rd morning, Taza appeared at the entrance. He didn't speak. He just jerked his head. Come. Narlin followed, her face a mask of suspicion. Taza led Magdalena to a smaller wickiup on the edge of the camp. The air inside was foul, thick with the smell of sickness and death. On a pallet of furs lay a small girl, perhaps 5 years old. She was burning with fever, her small body racked with tremors. Her mother, a young woman with the same hollow eyes as the others, sat weeping silently. This was Taza's niece, the one with the water sickness. Magdalena knelt. She wasn't a doctor, but she was a well-read woman from Boston. She had volunteered in clinics. She knew the signs of diphtheria, of cholera, of dysentery. This was none of those. The child's skin was hot and dry, but her lips had a strange, bluish tint. Her breath was shallow. Magdalena gently opened the child's mouth. The gums were pale and spongy. She looked at the water skin in the corner of the hut. "Where is this water from?" The mother looked at Taza, who translated. "The lower spring," he said. "The one your husband found," Nalin hissed from the doorway, her English surprisingly clear. "The one he blessed. He poisoned it," Magdalena said, the words tasting like ash. "This is arsenic, or mercury. It's heavy metal poisoning." Taza's face was unreadable stone. "Can you fix it?" "I don't know," Magdalena said honestly, her mind racing. "I don't have laudanum or anything. We need a real doctor." "We have you," Taza said. "What do you do?" Magdalena asked, turning on Nalin. "You are the medicine woman. What is your cure?" Nalin's eyes flashed. "I sing the songs. I use the hosh, cactus, and the sacred pollen, but the poison, it is stronger than the songs." "The songs won't work," Magdalena said, a sudden, desperate idea forming. "The poison is in her stomach, in her blood. We have to get it out." She looked around the hut. "I need charcoal from the fire, crushed, and clean water. Not from the spring." Taza's eyes narrowed. "Clean water? Rainwater? Snowmelt? Water he hasn't touched?" Taza nodded, a flicker of understanding. "The high spring, the one he could not find." He gave a sharp order in Apache. The child's mother ran from the hut. "Charcoal," Magdalena repeated, pointing to Nalin. "Burned wood, crushed to a powder. Now." Nalin looked to Taza, who gave a sharp nod. The old woman shot Magdalena a look of pure hatred, but she scurried out. Magdalena was left alone with the dying child. She took a cloth, dipped it in the tainted water, and began to bathe the child's face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, to the child, to the universe. "I'm so sorry. It's my people, my husband." The mother returned with a skin of water. Taza followed, holding a small stone bowl filled with black powder. "Give it to me," Magdalena commanded. She mixed the charcoal powder with a bit of the clean water, making a thick, black slurry. "What is this?" Taza asked, suspicious. "It's from a book," Magdalena improvised, her memory flashing to a footnote in a medical journal. "The charcoal. It binds. It holds the poison. It soaks it up." Nalin cried out from the doorway. "Cheaty! Witchcraft! You feed her dirt!" Magdalena ignored her. She gently prized open the child's mouth and, using her finger, forced the black paste down the girl's throat. The child gagged, then lay still. "Now," Magdalena said, her voice shaking but firm. "We wait." For hours they sat vigil. Magdalena, Taza, the mother, and Nalin, a silent, hateful shadow in the doorway. Magdalena forced sips of the clean water between the child's lips, over and over. As the sun set, the child's tremors eased. The fever did not break, but it lessened. Her breathing, while still shallow, seemed less strained. By midnight, the girl stirred. She opened her eyes and whispered one word: "Water." The mother cried out, a raw sob of joy. She rushed forward, giving the girl a sip from the clean skin. The girl drank, and this time she kept it down. Taza stared at Magdalena, his face a battleground of conflicting emotions. He had seen this sickness. He knew its course. It never reversed. Magdalena had just performed a miracle. She slumped against the wicky-up wall, the adrenaline draining away, leaving her utterly exhausted. Taza knelt in front of her. He was so close she could see the flecks of gold in his black eyes. He did not touch her. He did not thank her. He just asked a single terrifying question. "How?" he whispered, his voice rough. "Do you stop the poison? For good?" Magdalena looked at the man who had stolen her, the man who had lost his own son to this horror, and she realized the awful truth. "You can't," she said, her voice breaking. "You can't stop it, Taza. Not here. Not as long as Elias Thorne is alive." Taza's face hardened. He rose, a mountain of vengeance, and walked out of the hut into the moonless night, leaving Magdalena with the life she had just saved and the death sentence she had just pronounced on her own husband. Elias Thorne sipped his whiskey. The commissary at Fort Grant was little more than a plank-on-barrel bar in a sweltering adobe room, but the whiskey was passable. Across from him, Major Harrison Croft dabbed at his neck with a handkerchief. "It is a tragic situation, Mr. Thorne," Croft said, his tone one of official, practiced sympathy. "Your wife, taken by savages." Elias swirled the amber liquid, his face a mask of dignified grief. "She was a good woman, Major. A delicate woman. From Boston. Unprepared for this land." He let his voice crack just slightly. "When I think of what that brute, that giant, Taza, they call him, is doing to her." Croft's fist hit the table. "Damnable. It's a damnable situation. But my hands are tied, Mr. Thorne. The treaty. Elias let a flash of iron enter his voice. "The treaty they broke when they kidnapped a white woman from a federal station. The treaty they broke when they murdered old man Stubbs?" "Stubbs wasn't murdered," Croft corrected. "Broken wrist. He's at the infirmary, complaining about the food." Elias waved it away, annoyed by the man's refusal to die. "A technicality. They intended to murder him. They will murder my Magdalena. Unless we act." "Act how, sir? I can't send a column into the Dragoons on a what-if. I need specifics. I need cause." Elias leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Major, I am not just a grieving husband. I am, as you know, the chief surveyor for the Transcontinental. I have spent a year in these hills. I know them, perhaps better than the Apache themselves." He reached down to his satchel. His satchel. The one he'd packed himself. Not the one Magdalena had by her feet. He pulled out a roll of maps. His official maps. "They believe they are ghosts, Major. They are not. They are men. And men need water." He unrolled the map. "They are here, in what they call the High Stronghold. And this," he tapped a blue X, "is their main spring, the only one, this high up, that can support their entire band." Croft stared at the map, his eyes wide. That's the strategic key. Cut them off from that and they must surrender," Elias finished. "They'll be forced down onto the flats, where your men can retrieve my wife. My God, Thorne, this is brilliant. You've just handed me the solution to the Chiricahua problem on a silver platter." "I just want my wife back, Major," Elias said, lowering his eyes. He took a final sip. "I have a personal incentive. I have reason to believe Taza. I have reason to believe he is in league with competitors." "Competitors?" "The Arizona Mineral Trust," Elias said, inventing the name on the spot. "They've been trying to push the railroad north to their own mines. I believe they hired Taza to abduct my wife, to scare me off, to discredit my survey. It was a masterful lie. It tied everything together. Greed, savagery, corporate espionage. It gave Major Croft a white villain, which made the native villain even easier to hunt." "The trust?" Croft sputtered. "I'll have them investigated. This is an outrage." "First, Magdalena," Elias said, placing a hand on the Major's arm. "Please, time is of the essence, I fear." "Of course," Croft said, snapping into his role. "Sergeant," he bellowed, "assemble B troop. Full kit. We ride in 1 hour. Mr. Thorne," he said, turning back, "you will ride with us. You will be our guide." Elias Thorne smiled, a thin, cold expression. "It would be my honor, Major. I will lead you to Tarza's door myself." As he walked out into the parade ground, the setting sun casting a long, sharp shadow, Elias allowed himself a moment of private satisfaction. He had never intended for Magdalena to join him. Her arrival was an inconvenience, her ultimatum a laughable distraction. He had, in fact, received a telegram 2 days ago, and known she was at Calera station. He'd known the Apache were restless. He hadn't planned for her to be abducted. But, he mused, as he checked the action of his new Winchester repeater, one must always be prepared to turn a liability into an asset. If she was dead, she was a martyr. If she was alive, she was a distraction he'd have to deal with later. Either way, by this time tomorrow, the dragoons would be his. Magdalena's small miracle with the child had changed everything and nothing. She was no longer a prisoner. She was something else. The other women, the ones who had stared with hollow-eyed apathy, now watched her with a fragile, terrifying hope. They brought her things, a clean blanket, a bowl of stew with actual meat in it. Narlin, the old medicine woman, still watched her, but the hatred had been replaced by a grudging, resentful curiosity. But Magdalena felt no triumph. She felt only the crushing weight of Tarza's question. How do you stop it? She had no answer. She had one small trick, a parlor trick from a medical journal. She couldn't cure a tribe. She was sitting outside the wickiup, watching the thin, listless children when Tarza approached. He walked without a sound, a shadow detaching itself from the rocks. He sat on his haunches in front of her. "You are good," he said. It was not a compliment. It was a statement of fact. "Your Dian magic is strong." "It's not magic, Tarza. It's just charcoal." "Your husband, he comes." Magdalena's head snapped up. "What? How do you know?" "A scout. He left Fort Grant. He rides with the Nakai, soldiers. Many. They come fast. They will be here by sunup." He's coming to rescue me," she whispered, the words sounding hollow, even to her. "He comes to kill," Tarza corrected, his voice flat. "He comes to finish the job." "You don't know that," she flared, a last, desperate ember of loyalty. "He's my husband. He loves me." Tarza stared at her. The silence stretched. He seemed to be weighing a decision. Finally he nodded to himself, as if she had just confirmed something. "You are his," he said. "You believe his song." He stood up. "Come." He led her not to a wickiup, but to a small cave set high in the canyon wall, hidden by a curtain of brush. Inside it was cool and dark. A few bundles were stored here, hides, dried food, and a leather satchel. A fine, machine-stitched leather satchel, monogrammed with the initials, E.T. "My God," Magdalena breathed. This is Elias." She had assumed her own satchel, the one she'd left at the station, was the one Tarza meant. "My scout found it, near the Agua Fria, where he—" Tarza's voice faltered. "Your husband was careless." With trembling hands, Magdalena unfastened the straps. This wasn't a surveyor's bag. This was his private valise. Inside there were no maps. There were ledgers, letters, a journal. She pulled out a sheaf of letters, bound with a ribbon. They were addressed not to the railroad, but to a Mr. Wallace, President, Arizona Mineral Trust. She read, "The survey is proceeding. The army is a useful, if dull, tool. The Chiricahua are a nuisance, but one I am resolving. The trace minerals at Ocho Caliente are, as we suspected, high grade. The water poisoning is effective. It mimics dysentery. No one will be the wiser. A complete extermination is, of course, the cleanest solution. The cavalry is eager for a win, and I am eager to provide them one. The land will be clear for the Trust's equipment by fall. And then the last letter. One he must have been writing just before he lost the bag. My wife, Magdalena, has become problematic. Her Eastern sentiments are a liability. She insists on joining me. I have arranged for her to be stranded at Calera station. The area is active. It is my hope that the land itself will provide a solution to this final, domestic problem. The paper slipped from her fingers. He hadn't left her there. He had stranded her. He hadn't just hoped for a conflict. He had used her as the flint. He was hoping the Apache would kill her to give him a casus belli. Her abduction wasn't a liability. It was the jackpot. No, she whispered. The sound was a wounded thing. Taza watched her, his face grim. He is Udasht, he said. A bad spirit. A demon. The ground seemed to give way beneath her. Her entire life, her marriage, her move west, her love, had been a lie. She wasn't a wife. She was a liability. She wasn't a victim. She was bait. She fell to her knees, the letters scattered around her. And she was sick. She retched up the thin Apache stew, her body convulsing with the poison of the truth. Taza watched. He didn't comfort her. He didn't mock her. He just waited. When she was finished trembling, she looked up at him, her face stained with tears and bile. He's not coming to rescue me. He's coming to make sure I'm dead. To validate the story. Yes, Taza said. He's coming. To kill us all. To get his minds. Yes. Magdalena Thorne, the lady from Boston, died in that cave. The woman who rose to her feet was someone, and something else. She wiped her mouth on her sleeve. She looked Taza in the eye. Your scout, she said, her voice a raw, new instrument. Does he still live? Yes. Send him. Send him back to Fort Grant. Taza's eyes narrowed. Why? Because, Magdalena said, stuffing the letters, the proof, into the front of her torn dress. Elias is meticulous. He gave the Major one set of maps, but the real maps, the ones for the Mineral Trust, they're separate. What are you saying, woman? I'm saying, she said, her mind racing, a new cold fire in her veins, that my husband has a partner, Mr. Wallace, of the Arizona Mineral Trust. And if I know Elias, he's the kind of man who would betray anyone to get ahead, including his own partners. She looked at Taza, a wild, dangerous plan forming in her mind. Elias is leading the soldiers. He wants to kill you and be a hero. But what if the Trust thought Elias was betraying them? What if they thought he was making a side deal with the army, cutting them out? I do not understand. You don't have to, she said, grabbing his arm. Just give me a horse, and give me your fastest rider. She took a breath. Elias is leading the soldiers to you, but he's not the only one who knows these mountains. You are. We are not going to wait for him here. We are going to meet him. Taza stared at her. You would fight? Your own people? He is not my people, Magdalena said, her voice like flint. Not anymore. He tried to have me murdered. He is murdering you. The only person Elias Thorne trusts is Elias Thorne. And I'm going to use that. I'm going to set a fire, and I'm going to let him run right into it. She was no longer his prisoner. She was, quite suddenly, his only ally. The plan was desperate, born of fire and arsenic. Taza's warriors, fewer than 30 men, all of them weary and half-starved, looked at Magdalena with disbelief. But they listened to Taza. And Taza, for reasons he himself did not fully understand, was listening to her. They did not ride to Fort Grant. There was no time. Instead, they rode to the only other place Elias would feel safe, the offices of the Arizona Mineral Trust, a small, dusty outpost in the mining town of Benson. Taza's scout, a young man named Kai, rode like the wind. He carried a single, muddy, blood-stained letter from Magdalena's satchel, and a new message, scrawled by Magdalena in her husband's own stolen ink pen. "Wallace, he's betrayed us. He's leading the cavalry to the Ojo Caliente claim, not the stronghold. He's cutting us out. Stop him." A friend. It was a long shot, a prayer, but it was all they had. The rest of the night was spent in a flurry of activity. Taza did not evacuate the stronghold. He fortified it, just as Elias would expect. But the real trap was not in the stronghold. It was in the narrow canyon, 5 miles below it. The only approach. Dawn broke, sharp and clear. Major Harrison Croft was impressed. Elias Thorne was a man of his word. He had led B Troop through the night, using goat paths and game trails, and had delivered them, as promised, to the mouth of the Apache's lair. "They're in there, Major," Elias said, his voice ringing with confidence. He pointed his spyglass at the smoke rising from the basin above. "They're trapped, like rats." "Excellent, Mr. Thorne, excellent." Croft turned to his men. "Sergeants, we will advance on foot. A platoon takes the right flank. B platoon the left. No shooting until I give the order. We are here to secure the hostage." "Of course, Major." Elias smiled. The soldiers dismounted, checking their rifles, and began the arduous, rock-strewn climb into the canyon. Elias remained on his horse, alongside Major Croft and a small rear guard. It was quiet. Too quiet. "I don't like this, sir," Croft's sergeant muttered. "Feels wrong." "Nonsense, Sergeant," Elias said, a little too loudly. "They're terrified. They're waiting for us to—" A single rifle shot cracked from the ridge above. A soldier screamed and went down. "Ambush!" Croft roared. "Take cover! Return fire!" The canyon erupted. Gunfire echoed from both sides. But the Apache weren't shooting to kill. They were shooting high, chipping rocks, creating panic. Taza's warriors were ghosts, firing once, then disappearing. They're everywhere!" a young private yelled. "They're not everywhere, trooper," Elias shouted, his face pale. "They're just push forward. They're trying to bluff us." "Mr. Thorne," Croft said, his voice cold. "You said they were few. You said they were weak." "They are. They must be," Elias said, his eyes frantically scanning the ridges. This wasn't right. And then he saw her. On a high ledge, halfway between the soldiers and the stronghold, a figure stepped into the open. It was a woman. Her blonde hair was a matted mess. Her dress was in tatters. It was Magdalena. "Magdalena!" Elias screamed, his voice a mixture of shock and rage. "Get down! Get back!" Major Croft stared. "My God, it's her! She's alive! Cease fire! Cease fire!" The shooting trickled to a stop. Magdalena stood, her hands at her side. She looked calm. "Elias," she called, her voice clear and strong, echoing down the canyon. "Elias Thorne! Magdalena, I'm here! We're here to save you!" Elias spurred his horse forward a few steps. "Save me?" She laughed. It was a terrible, broken sound. "Or resolve me, Elias. Was I problematic?" Elias froze. His blood turned to ice. Problematic. His word, from his journal. What are you talking about, my love? The savages they've twisted your mind." "No, Elias," she said, taking a step forward. "They just showed me your letters." Major Croft turned, his face slack with confusion. "Letters? What letters?" "The letters to Mr. Wallace, Major," Magdalena called out. "Of the Arizona Mineral Trust, the ones where he details exactly how he poisoned the Apache Springs, the ones where he boasts about using the U.S. Army, as his private extermination service." Croft looked at Elias. Elias was chalk white. "She's mad. Raving. It's Apache witchcraft." "Is it?" Magdalena said. She reached into her dress and pulled out the sheaf of papers. She held them high. "Or is it your ledger, Elias? The one detailing the high-grade arsenic? The one where you plan to cut the trust out and sell the claims directly to the railroad?" A new sound. From the mouth of the canyon. Behind them, a dozen men on horseback. They weren't soldiers. They were hard cases. Pinkerton agents, in dusty suits, armed with shotguns. "Mr. Thorne," one of them yelled. He had a piece of paper in his hand. "Mr. Wallace sends his regards. He says your partnership is dissolved." Elias's world imploded. The message. The scout. It wasn't for Croft. It was for Wallace. She had set them against each other. "No!" Elias screamed. He looked at Croft. He looked at the Pinkertons. He was trapped. He did the only thing he could. He drew his revolver and aimed it at the source of his ruin. At his wife. "You bitch!" he shrieked. He fired, but Taza had been waiting. A single shot rang out from the rocks beside Magdalena. It wasn't a soldier's carbine. It was the deep boom of a sharp's. Elias Thorne didn't even make a sound. The bullet struck him square in the chest, lifting him clean out of the saddle. He was dead before he hit the ground. An unholy silence fell over the canyon. Major Croft looked at the body of Elias Thorne. He looked at the hard-eyed Pinkertons, who were already lowering their guns. He looked at the tattered woman on the ridge, who was now holding the damning letters. "Major," she called, her voice soft now. He was a monster. He was poisoning everyone. He lied to you. He left me to die." Croft, a man of simple, brutal honor, saw the truth. He'd been used. He'd been made a fool, an errand boy for a pair of feuding, murderous land grabbers. "Sergeant," Croft said, his voice thick with disgust. "Secure the body. We are retreating. This is a civilian matter." He turned his horse, refusing to even look at the Pinkertons, and gave the order. "Column, withdraw." The soldiers, confused and spooked, were only too happy to obey. They retreated down the canyon, passing the Pinkertons, who were already dismounting to search Elias's saddlebags. Magdalena watched them go. Then she watched the Pinkertons gather their evidence, which would, she knew, never see a courtroom. It would be buried along with Elias's body. She was alone. She sank to her knees, the letters fluttering from her hand. A shadow fell over her. Taza stood there. He had come from the rocks. His rifle was still warm. He looked down at her, this strange, pale woman who had saved his people with words and ink. He reached out a hand, not to grab, to offer. "It is done," he said. Magdalena looked at his hand. It was the same hand that had clamped over her mouth, the hand that had pulled her onto his horse. She did not take it. She used the rock to pull herself to her feet. She stood, unsteady but on her own. She was not his. She was not Elias's. She was not Boston's. "It's done," she agreed. They stood there for a long time, two survivors from different worlds, staring at the dust of the retreating armies. Taza had his stronghold, and Magdalena was finally, terrifyingly, free. And so Magdalena Thorne walked out of the Dragoon Mountains. She didn't go back east. She couldn't. She walked into Benson, and with the letters as her only weapon, she testified. Not against the Apache, but against the Arizona Mineral Trust. The scandal was huge. It didn't bring Taza's people justice, not really, but it stopped the poison. It gave them time. And Magdalena? She took the small inheritance Elias had never known about, and she bought the one place that felt like hers, the burnt-out, abandoned Calera station. She reopened it, not as a way station for prospectors, but as a trading post, a place between worlds. The soldiers called her the Apache widow. The settlers thought she was crazy. But sometimes, on a still, clear night, a shadow would detach itself from the mountains, and a bundle would be left at her door. Fresh jerky, clean herbs, or a single, perfect eagle feather. A payment, a thank you, a promise. She was no longer a settler. She was a bridge. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West. You're coming with me. The West wasn't just one with bullets. It was one with grit, with betrayal, and sometimes with an impossible, unbreakable will to survive. If this story gripped you, if you felt the heat of that desert sun and the cold of that final choice, please do us a favor. Hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that you have great taste. Subscribe to our channel for more tales of drama, twists, and the untold history of the American frontier. And click that share button to send this story to someone else who loves a high-stakes drama. Most importantly, leave a comment below. What did you think of Magdalena's choice? Was Taza a villain or a hero? We read every single comment. Until the next story, ride safe and watch your back.